Why was the library so quiet, too quiet, as if the whole world was holding its breath? Lillian Foster sat hunched over her organic chemistry textbook, a pencil tucked behind her ear and the glow of her laptop painting her face in tired light. Outside the window, November rain streaked down the glass, making the Portland campus look even grayer than usual. She should have been thinking about carbon bonds, reaction pathways, and the midterm waiting for her in less than 48 hours. But instead, her mind kept drifting. Drifting to memories she usually buried, dusty summers in eastern Oregon, the smell of gun oil, and her grandfather's raspy voice teaching her to slow her breathing until the world felt still. She shook her head, forcing her focus back to the page. Med school, a 3.8 GPA, a carefully constructed life her parents would be proud of. That was her path, not rifles, not violence. Certainly not the shadow of war that her father despised so much. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She frowned, almost ignored it, probably another robocall, but something made her answer. Hello. The voice on the other end was gravelly, clipped. Military. Miss Foster, this is Colonel United States Navy. I need you to listen carefully. Your grandfather gave me this number. He said, "You're the one who can help." Her heart stuttered. My grandfather, is he okay? He's fine, but one of my SEAL teams is. 6 men trapped in hostile territory. They need Overwatch. All my snipers are hours away. Your grandfather told me you could do things most trained shooters can't. He said you were steady, precise, and fearless. The words didn't feel real. She stared at her textbook, the molecular models on the page blurring. I'm just a college student. I've never. Miss Foster. His tone softened, but urgency pulsed beneath it. If you were in trouble, outnumbered, waiting for help that wouldn't come in time, wouldn't you want someone to take the shot for you? Silence. The question struck deeper than she expected. Her whole life had been about avoiding conflict, about believing in words over weapons. Her parents built a career on peace studies, teaching her that violence was never the answer. But what if peace wasn't on the table? What if good people were about to die because no one was willing to act? She closed her eyes. In her mind she saw her grandfather, Bear Foster, adjusting her grip on a rifle when she was 12 years old. Violence should never be your first choice, little bear, he'd said. But when evil stares down the barrel at innocence, someone needs to be ready to stare back. When she opened her eyes, the chemistry textbook was just paper and ink. The voice in her ear was real. The decision waiting for her was real. Where are they? She whispered. 20 minutes later, Lillian found herself in the back seat of a black SUV, city lights streaking past. The rifle case beside her looked like something out of a nightmare, heavy, dark, final. The Navy petty officer driving didn't waste words. His name was Santos, his eyes tired, his jaw locked tight as he navigated through the rain. Her hands trembled, though whether from fear or adrenaline she couldn't tell. Hours ago, she had been nothing more than another face in the library. Now, 6 men's lives hung on a choice she had already made. The staging area looked abandoned from the outside, a rundown gas station on the edge of the industrial district. But inside, it pulsed with urgent energy. Men in tactical gear huddled over maps, radios crackled with static-laced voices, vehicles idled with headlights cut. And then, Colonel himself stepped forward. His hair was steel gray, his face weathered by decades of combat. But his eyes carried the weight of command, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and still carried on. He studied her for a long beat before speaking. "You're young," he said flatly. "I didn't ask for this," she replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "No," said his gaze softening slightly. "But you answered anyway, that counts for something." He gestured to the table where a weapon lay waiting. Not the hunting rifles her grandfather kept on his ranch, but something bigger. A .50 caliber sniper rifle, black, brutal, designed for war. "The hostile sniper has them pinned down," explained. 600 meters. He's got high ground and overlapping fields of fire. They can't move, can't retreat. 2 are wounded already. They won't survive another hour. This shot isn't complicated, but it has to be perfect. Her breath caught as she lifted the rifle, heavier than she remembered, familiar and alien all at once. The cold metal pressed into her palms, grounding her in reality. "This isn't target practice, Miss Foster," continued quietly. "If you take this shot, you'll end a life." The weight of the truth pressed against her chest. She thought of her parents, of every dinner conversation filled with the promise that words could heal the world. She thought of her organic chemistry exam, of medical school applications, of a future devoted to saving lives. And then, over the radio, she heard it. "Reaper Actual, this is Overwatch request. We're pinned. We need that sniper down. We're running out of time." The voice was strained, desperate, but still controlled. A leader holding his men together while the walls closed in. Lieutenant Commander. A man she had never met but whose life was suddenly tied to hers. Lillian closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw the quiet dorm room she'd left behind. The warmth of her parents' voices. Her grandfather's weathered hand steadying hers. And then she saw 6 silhouettes, faceless but real, waiting for her decision. When she opened her eyes, there was no more hesitation. "Show me the position," she said. Minutes later, she lay prone on a rooftop, rain slick on her cheek, the bipod sunk into the gravel. The city stretched out before her, neon reflections smearing in puddles, but her world narrowed to a single crosshair. 600 meters. 3rd floor window, a muzzle flash in the dark. Her breathing slowed, heartbeat stilled. The lessons came back to her as if her grandfather was whispering them now. Natural point of aim. Exhale. Squeeze, don't pull. "Reaper, this is Overwatch. I have your hostile," she murmured into the radio. Her own voice sounded foreign to her ears. "Copy Overwatch. We'll draw him out. On my mark, 3, 2, 1. Gunfire erupted below as the SEALs returned fire, a desperate distraction. And there, the hostile sniper shifted, muzzle flash betraying him. Lillian tracked the movement, crosshairs steady. Time slowed. For a heartbeat, she wasn't a college kid or a soldier. She was just a set of hands holding fate in balance. The trigger broke like glass. The roared, shaking her bones. Through the scope, she saw the figure collapse still. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. "Reaper to Overwatch," the voice came back, trembling with relief. "Target down. Say again, target is down. Outstanding shot." She should have felt triumph, but instead a hollow ache settled in her chest. She had just crossed a line she could never uncross. Someone was dead, and 6 men were alive because of it. Her hands tightened around the rifle, the unfamiliar weight no longer just metal. It was a burden, a choice, a truth. And then through the static of the radio, new words cut in. Urgent, grim. "Command, this is Reaper. We've got movement all around. Reinforcements, at least 10. They're surrounding us. Extraction is still 40 minutes out. We're not going to hold." The mission wasn't over. Her one shot had saved them for now, but it was only the beginning. And Lillian Foster, the pacifist's daughter who had come to the library to study chemistry, now lay in the rain with a rifle, staring down a night that promised only fire, fear, and choices she never thought she'd have to make. What happens when the echo fades, but the silence feels heavier than the gunfire? Lillian stayed pressed against the rooftop gravel, her cheek cold against the rifle stock, waiting for the next shot that didn't come. The man in the 3rd floor window was gone. 6 men had their lives back because of her. Yet she felt no celebration, no fist-pumping victory, just the sharp taste of copper on her tongue and the weight of the choice she couldn't undo. "Overwatch, target down confirmed. Outstanding shot." His voice crackled through her headset again, steadier now but still taut with urgency. "But don't relax, we're still surrounded. They're tightening the net." Colonel's voice followed, colder, all business. Miss Foster, we need you for continued support. Reinforcements are moving in. Can you stay in position? She hesitated. Every nerve in her body wanted to crawl back to the safety of the SUV, to vanish into the normal life she'd left behind hours ago. But another voice rose inside her, her grandfather's, low and steady. When the wolves come, someone has to stand between them and the sheep. I'll stay, she whispered. The next minutes unraveled like a nightmare moving too fast for her to catch. Thermal scope glowing, she scanned the industrial maze. At least a dozen new heat signatures appeared, shapes moving with purpose, weapons slung, setting up overlapping fields of fire. Not chaotic smugglers, not amateurs. These men moved like soldiers. Reaper, this is Overwatch, she reported, her voice steadier than her pounding heart. Multiple hostiles moving into position, at least 12, coordinated. You've got machine guns and RPGs setting up on the perimeter. Copy, answered, voice low. We see it too. They're not here to scare us off. They're here to finish us. Through her scope, she caught the first team wheeling a heavy machine gun into position north of the warehouse. If they set that up, the SEAL's fragile cover would evaporate. Her mind began calculating without thought distance, wind, the math her grandfather had drilled into her under Oregon skis. She exhaled, squeezed. The gunner dropped. The rifle's recoil slammed into her shoulder again, familiar now. The machine gun fell silent, but almost instantly, another hostile leapt forward to man it. Her scope adjusted, the crosshairs found him, and she pulled again. Machine gun neutralized, she reported. Copy that, Overwatch. Good work, we're moving the wounded. His voice carried something more than gratitude now, trust. But her position was no longer secret. Muzzle flashes bloomed in the dark. Bullets sparked against the steel tower she perched on, whining past her head. They've spotted me, she gasped. Overwatch, get out of there, barked. Her stomach tightened, adrenaline flooding her veins. She slung the rifle, scrambling down the ladder as bullets chewed the rungs around her. Sparks lit the night. Every breath felt like borrowed time. She dropped the last 10 feet, hitting the ground hard, pain flashing in her knees. Santos extraction, she shouted into the radio. The SUV roared forward from the shadows, headlights blacked out, engine growling. She threw herself into the passenger seat as rounds pinged off the metal shell. Santos slammed the accelerator, weaving through the maze of warehouses. New position, his voice ordered in her ear. We've scouted an unfinished office building 800 meters out. Better cover, better. Can you keep going? She looked down at her trembling hands, at the bruises already rising on her palms. Could she keep going? She thought of the voices in her headset. Men fighting, bleeding, trapped. She thought of the silence that would follow if she didn't. Yes, she said, I can. The unfinished office building loomed like a skeleton against the night sky, concrete floors open to the air, rusted rebar jutting into the rain. She climbed 3 stories, set up behind a broken wall, and unfolded the bipod once more. The rifle was cold against her cheek, but now, strangely, it felt like an anchor. Through the scope, the battlefield spread before her like a deadly map. The SEAL's warehouse flickered with muzzle flashes. The hostiles' shapes glowed bright in thermal, a dozen, maybe more, shifting with ruthless coordination. Overwatch, this is Reaper. We're taking heavy fire. We need a path out, his voice cut through. She scanned quickly, identifying 2 machine gun teams covering the exits. If she dropped them, maybe the SEALs could move. Reaper, stand by, she said. The first gunner dropped. The second fell seconds later. The warehouse's eastern exit was clear. Overwatch, you just saved our asses, said. We're moving wounded now, keep them off us. She wanted to reply, but her scope revealed something worse. A new threat. A team wheeling a heavy tripod-mounted weapon into position. Not a machine gun this time. Something bigger. Command, this is Overwatch, she reported. They've got a heavy weapon moving in. Looks like a DK or equivalent. If they get it operational, the warehouse won't hold. His voice came grim. Can you stop it? She exhaled. The shot was brutal, long-range, partially concealed target. She adjusted for elevation, wind, every variable. And then she aimed not at the man, but at the weapon itself. The round punched into the receiver, shattering it in an eruption of sparks and twisted metal. Weapon neutralized, she said, her voice flat with focus. The reprieve was brief. New signatures appeared, 3 RPG teams spreading out preparing to fire. Her chest tightened. She could feel time slipping through her fingers. Reaper, you've got RPGs moving. I'll engage. Her scope locked onto the first team, 2 men, 1 launcher, 1 carrying rockets. She dropped them both in 3 breaths, then pivoted, taking the second team through a sliver of exposed heat. The third was harder, hidden behind concrete. She fired anyway, praying calculation met instinct. The hostile fell back. Maybe dead, maybe wounded, but not firing. Her rifle thundered again and again. Each shot a calculation, each shot a decision, each shot a life ending so others could continue. Her count ticked in her head, 7 rounds gone, 9, 11, her magazine dwindling, her shoulder bruised raw from the recoil. The SEALs broke from the warehouse, carrying their wounded, darting between cover as she rained precision from above. She cleared their path, round by round, even as hostile fire converged on her new perch. Overwatch, you're the only thing keeping us alive right now, breathed. Don't stop. But her rifle clicked dry, empty. She slammed in another magazine, hands trembling, breath ragged. Every fiber of her being wanted to quit, to run, to go back to the safety of dorm rooms and textbooks and the life she thought was hers. But she didn't, because she wasn't the same girl anymore. And the night wasn't done with her yet. How long could one person hold back the dark? Through the broken concrete wall of the unfinished office building, Lillian scanned the battlefield again. Her scope glowed with shifting heat signatures, each one a threat closing in on the trapped SEALs. Her breathing came hard now, ragged between shots, but her hands kept moving, smooth, steady, automatic. Muscle memory from summers she had once thought were innocent. Overwatch, this is Reaper. We're halfway across the yard, but we're getting hammered from the east side. His voice growled in her ear. Her scope shifted. There are 3 hostiles firing from behind industrial machinery, suppressing the SEAL's movement. She lined up, squeezed, dropped one, adjusted, dropped the second. The third ducked, then peeked just enough for her to finish the sequence. East side suppressed, she reported. Copy, moving, answered, his voice clipped, controlled. But even as the SEALs advanced, more shapes slipped into the perimeter. She could see them moving in tactical formations, not like street-level criminals. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. And worse, headlights appeared in the distance, more vehicles rolling toward the complex. Command, this is Overwatch, she said, trying to keep her voice even. I've got multiple vehicles inbound. Reinforcements, at least another squad. His voice came grim. We're confirming the same on drone feeds. Miss Foster, you need to understand, this is no longer a training mishap. You've stumbled into something bigger, possibly paramilitary. Her stomach sank. She wasn't just shooting smugglers. These were professionals, trained, equipped, and she was one person with a borrowed rifle. Reaper continued, extraction is still 30 minutes out. You've got to hold until then. 30 minutes. It sounded impossible. Her magazine count was dropping fast. Her shoulder throbbed from recoil. And the hostiles were adapting, using smoke, moving in coordinated waves, probing for her position. Copy, she said anyway. Her scope caught a flash, a hostile with an RPG raising the tube. Too close. She fired, dropped him, but the rocket slipped from his grasp and detonated against the warehouse wall. The explosion shook the ground, concrete collapsing inward. His voice came ragged through the headset. We've lost part of our cover, 2 wounded, getting worse. If they breach again, we won't hold. Lillian's heart hammered, her every shot mattered, every mistake carried weight she couldn't afford. She exhaled, lined up another and fired. Another hostile fell, and another. Her count rose 6, 9, 11. She had stopped counting kills and started counting magazines. Santos's voice came through the radio from her support team. Overwatch, status on ammo. She looked at the rounds left in the box magazine. 2 mags left, maybe 15 rounds. There was a pause, make them count. The hostiles knew where she was now. Muzzle flashes converged on her position. Bullets chewed the concrete around her, sparks spraying across her cheek. Dust filled her lungs. She coughed, blinked grit from her eyes but stayed on the rifle. She thought of her parents, of their quiet home, their endless books on peace and conflict resolution. What would they say if they saw her now, killing strangers with mechanical precision? What would they see in her eyes if they learned she wasn't ashamed, only resolved? The rifle cracked again. Another hostile collapsed. Overwatch, you're saving our lives down here. His voice came, lower now, almost reverent. Don't you dare stop. But the next moment her rifle clicked dry. She slapped in her last magazine, her breath shaking. 10 rounds. That was it. 10 shots between life and annihilation. Her scope found a cluster of hostiles breaching from the north. She fired, dropped 2, then shifted. But as she lined up the next, gunfire erupted closer, too close. Not at the seals, at her building. Thermal signatures appeared in the stairwell. 3, no, 4. They weren't shooting at the warehouse anymore. They were coming for her. Her throat went dry. She whispered into the radio, "Command, they're moving on my position." His voice came hard. "Miss Foster, disengage. Move to extraction. You're about to be overrun." She looked at the stairwell entrance below. Shadows shifted. Boots pounded concrete. They were inside the building. "Overwatch, what's your status?" demanded. She swallowed hard. Her voice came steadier than she felt. "I've got company." Silence on the net, then's reply flat, absolute. "Hold, we're not leaving you behind." Her pulse thundered in her ears. The rifle felt too long, too heavy for the corridors below, but it was all she had. She pulled her last round into the chamber, glanced once through the scope at the battlefield below. The seals were moving, using the opening she'd carved. They were closer to escape now because of her. But she might not make it out. Boots echoed louder. Voices shouted in harsh foreign accents. The stairwell door banged open. And Lillian Foster, the girl who had walked into the library hours ago with nothing but a pencil and a dream of medical school, now gripped a rifle with bloody knuckles and prepared to face war up close. What do you do when the enemy isn't a shape in your scope, but footsteps on the stairs below you? Lillian's breath came sharp, fast, every muscle wired tight as she pressed her back to the cold concrete wall. Her rifle felt too long now, awkward in the narrow frame of the stairwell doorway. They had been built to reach across valleys, not hallways. She gripped it anyway, knuckles pale, because it was all she had. The voices grew louder, climbing toward her. Harsh, clipped, Russian, Ukrainian, she couldn't tell. What mattered was the rhythm of boots slamming metal steps, getting closer. She whispered into the headset, "Command, they're inside the building." His reply came taut, grim. "Copy. Overwatch, get to ground floor and move to extraction. Do not stay engaged." Move to extraction. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But her body stayed rooted, pulse hammering. If she bolted, she'd be caught in the open stairwell. If she hesitated, they'd pour in on her. "Overwatch," his voice cut through next, low and urgent. "We're almost clear of the warehouse. Hold if you can, just hold." Her grandfather's words flashed like lightning across her memory. Sometimes, little bear, the only way to win is to refuse to lose. The stairwell door banged open. The first hostile appeared, a shadow in her scope before she even thought. Reflex took over. She fired at point-blank range. The roared, deafening in the confined concrete space. The hostile was lifted backward, his body slamming into the wall before crumpling. The recoil knocked her shoulder numb, the blast echoing in her skull. She coughed against the dust, ears ringing, but she didn't stop. Another shape surged through the door, rifle raised. She swung like a club this time, smashing the heavy stock into his jaw. Bone cracked, teeth flew. He collapsed, screaming, clutching his face. Adrenaline blurred her thoughts into instinct. She moved fast, dragging herself back into the skeletal hallway of the unfinished building. Cover, concealment, anything to keep distance. "Contact," she gasped into the radio. "Two down, more coming." "Overwatch, hang on," barked. But the building was alive with sound now. Boots, shouts, the scrape of rifles against concrete. She wasn't just hunted anymore, she was surrounded. She ducked behind a stack of steel beams, heart pounding so loud it drowned the gunfire outside. Her scope flashed heat signatures through thin cover, 3 hostiles fanning out across the floor. Coordinated, patient, predators sweeping for prey. She forced her breathing steady the way Bear had taught her. In, hold, out. Her hands trembled, but her mind sharpened. Not panic, not fear, analysis, like chemistry problems, like reaction chains. Angles, timing, probability. The first hostile crept past the steel beams, muzzle searching. She didn't hesitate. Her second-to-last round exploded from the barrel, tearing through his chest. He dropped without a sound. The others fired back instantly, bullets chewing sparks from the metal around her. She rolled, gritting her teeth against the sting of splinters in her arms. Her final round chambered with a clean metallic click. She waited. The second hostile broke cover, rushing her position. She fired. He collapsed mid-stride. Silence, broken only by the ringing in her ears. And then the click of a pistol behind her. She froze. "Drop it," a voice ordered in accented English. Calm, deadly. She turned slowly. The third fighter stood in the doorway, sidearm steady, aimed between her eyes. His expression was stone, his finger already curved on the trigger. She looked down at the, empty now, useless, too heavy to swing fast enough. Her chest tightened. This was it. This was where the story ended, a college kid playing soldier until the real killers closed in. But then through the fog of fear, her grandfather's voice returned. Sometimes the rifle isn't for distance. Sometimes it's just a weight. Use it. Instead of dropping it, she swung the up, slamming the barrel against the pistol. The shot cracked wild, scorching the air beside her ear. She rammed the stock forward, slamming it into his chest. He stumbled, gasping. She followed with a savage upward strike beneath his chin. His head snapped back, body crashing into the concrete wall. He collapsed, dazed, unmoving. Her hands shook violently now. She could hardly breathe, but she was still standing, still alive. The radio crackled in her ear. "Overwatch status," demanded. She swallowed hard, forcing words past the hammering in her chest. "Lobby is clear, out of ammunition, but alive." Relief burst across the channel. "Hold position, we're coming to you." Seconds later, the SEALs stormed through the lower entrance in a coordinated rush, rifles sweeping, boots pounding. They looked like shadows of war, every movement efficient, lethal. Himself appeared first, tall, broad, helmet smeared with grime. His eyes landed on her, pale face, bruised shoulder, empty rifle, and the unconscious hostile at her feet. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Did you just beat someone down with a 50 cal?" Lillian's voice surprised even herself. Calm, flat. "He's not dead, just unconscious." One of the SEALs, blood seeping from his bandaged arm, let out a laugh full of disbelief. "Ma'am, that's the most badass thing I've ever seen." The tension broke for half a heartbeat, but then reality rushed back in. Keyed his radio. "Command, this is Reaper. We've got Overwatch in one piece. Building secure. Request immediate extraction." "Copies," voice came. "Birds inbound, 2 minutes, hold LZ." As the SEALs moved to secure the lobby, stepped closer, his voice dropping to something softer. "You saved us. Every damn one of us. Don't think for a second we'll forget it." Lillian looked down at the rifle in her hands, empty now, battered from use as both weapon and shield. She thought of the 7 men she had killed tonight, the 8th who lay unconscious at her feet. She thought of the choice she had made in the library, of the line she had crossed. She had stepped into something she could never step back from. And the night wasn't done. Because outside, through the broken windows, the industrial complex still burned, and more headlights glowed on the horizon. What happens when the roar of battle begins to fade, but the silence feels louder than the gunfire ever did? The rotors came first, faint at a distance, a low thrum rolling through the broken windows of the office skeleton, rattling the rebar like hollow bones. Lillian froze when she heard it, her whole body bracing, because sound meant salvation, but it also meant exposure. "Birds inbound," said, raising his voice over the chaos of reloading magazines and repositioning men. "2 Black Hawks, ETA 90 seconds. Hold this position." 90 seconds. It sounded like a miracle. 90 seconds to be pulled out of the nightmare. 90 seconds to leave behind the smoke, the blood, the stink of gunpowder that clung to her skin. But 90 seconds was also long enough to die. Through the shattered concrete, she could see headlights still multiplying on the horizon, drawing closer. Engines revved, doors slammed, figures spilling into the dark like ants from a crushed hill. Her heart plummeted. "They're not quitting," she whispered. "No," agreed grimly. "They want the kill too badly." The SEALs moved like ghosts, setting up fields of fire across the lobby, weapons steady despite exhaustion. Lillian crouched against the wall, empty rifle across her knees. She felt like dead weight now, stripped of her purpose. But then a hand pressed something into her palms, a carbine, lighter, shorter, magazine already loaded. Met her eyes. "You're not done yet." She hesitated, the smaller weapon alien in her grip. Unlike this wasn't about distance, patience, calculation. This was about chaos, speed, survival. "I don't." "You've got instincts," he cut in. "We saw it, trust them, we'll get you through." The first wave hit like a tide. Glass shattered, doors splintered as figures poured in with shouting voices and blinding muzzle flashes. The SEALs opened up in unison, disciplined bursts tearing into the assault. Lillian flinched, pressed against the wall, her finger frozen on the trigger. "This isn't your fight. You don't belong here." But then a shape surged through the doorway, close, too close, muzzle flaring towards back. She didn't think. She didn't weigh morality or futures. She just raised the carbine and fired. The hostile crumpled, spun at the sound, caught her eyes for a split second, and gave the slightest nod before turning back to the fight. Her hands shook violently. She had pulled the trigger again. But this time there had been no scope, no distance. She had looked into someone's face and chosen. The helicopters swept in overhead, their floodlights carving harsh white beams across the dark. Wind and rain whipped through the broken lobby as ropes dropped, swaying like lifelines from heaven. "Move," barked. The SEALs formed up, dragging their wounded, covering each other with a precision born of countless missions. Lillian stumbled forward with them, clumsy compared to their smooth movements, but propelled by the same urgency. The air was alive with bullets, tracers crisscrossing like angry fireflies. She reached the rope. Her hand slipped on the slick nylon, but strong arms steadied her from below, Santos, grim-faced, hauling her into position. "Climb, Foster," he shouted over the rotor wash. She wrapped her bruised hands around the rope and climbed, every muscle screaming, boots slipping. Wind tore at her hair, rain blinded her eyes, but she kept moving. Above, a crewman leaned out, shouting encouragement, reaching. She grabbed his arm, felt the rough fabric of his glove, and was yanked aboard. She collapsed onto the metal floor of the Black Hawk, chest heaving, arms trembling. The world outside blurred, flashes of gunfire, figures growing smaller, the office building shrinking beneath them as the helicopter lifted into the storm. clambered in last, pulling one of his wounded men with him. He slapped the crew chief's shoulder. "We're up, go, go." The bird banked hard, pulling away from the inferno below. Lillian lay on the cold floor, staring up at the vibrating ceiling, her body still locked in fight or flight. Her mind screamed for release, for tears, for screams, for anything. But nothing came. Just silence inside, colder than the rain. No one spoke for a long time. The SEALs sat against the walls, armor dented, bandages soaking red, eyes hollow. Even his face streaked with grime said nothing. They had all been in fights before, but something about tonight weighed heavier. Finally broke the silence. He looked at her, really looked, as if trying to reconcile the exhausted girl before him with the unseen sniper who had saved them. "You're not one of us," he said quietly, "but you did what we needed, and you didn't break." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say she had broken with every shot, every choice, every life taken, but the words stuck. Instead she whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." His gaze softened, but only for a beat. That's war. It takes pieces of you, reshapes what's left. The question is, what do you do with what remains? The helicopter roared through the storm. Lillian closed her eyes, but instead of relief, she saw every face she'd ended tonight. Faces she had never known, never spoken to, never hated. People who had simply been on the other side of a rifle. By the time they landed at a secured airfield, dawn was smudging pale light across the horizon. The sky looked washed out, indifferent to what had happened beneath it. Inside a makeshift debriefing room, Colonel waited, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Lillian sat opposite him, shoulders slumped, a blanket draped over her trembling frame. A cup of untouched coffee steamed at her elbow. "You saved 6 Navy SEALs tonight," said evenly. "That's the headline." Her voice cracked, "and killed more than a dozen men." "That's the part no one writes down," he replied. Silence stretched between them. She stared at the tabletop, fighting the rising tide in her chest. "I was supposed to be a doctor," she whispered. "I wanted to save lives, not take them." His face softened for the first time. "And you did save lives. 6. Maybe more if this team uncovers what those men were doing out there. Miss Foster, what you did tonight wasn't about choosing war. It was about refusing to let good men die when you could stop it." She shook her head. The logic didn't soothe the ache. Her hands still smelled of gunpowder, her shoulders still bruised raw. "I don't know if I can live with it." Leaned forward. "You will or you won't, but either way it's yours now." She closed her eyes, tears burning but refusing to fall. Somewhere inside she still heard her grandfather's voice, calm, steady, unyielding. "Dignity doesn't shout, little bear. It acts, quietly, and it never asks permission." For the first time, she wondered if he had always known she'd end up here. If he had trained her not for sport, not for hunting, but for this. The debrief ended with no resolution, no closure. Just silence, paperwork, and a lingering ache that wouldn't leave. And as the sun broke fully across the horizon, painting the world in gold, Lillian Foster sat alone in the barracks, staring at her trembling hands, wondering if they still belonged to the girl who once wanted nothing more than to heal. What if survival was only the beginning of the trap? 2 days after the extraction, Lillian still woke to the sound of rotors in her dreams. The barracks bed beneath her would shake with phantom vibrations, her heart would leap, and she'd jerk upright in sweat, clawing for a rifle that wasn't there. Daylight offered no comfort. She walked the corridors of the secured facility like a ghost, head down, hands buried in her sweatshirt sleeves. The SEALs had been given their debriefs, their commendations, their orders to rest. But she wasn't military. She was a question mark, an anomaly the system didn't know what to do with. Everywhere she went, eyes followed her. Young analysts, grizzled operators, even himself. She could feel their stares. The college girl who picked up a .50 cal and saved a SEAL team, hero to some, liability to others, to herself. She didn't know anymore. She spent hours in the rec room staring at the muted TV. News anchors speculated about increased insurgent activity overseas. Nothing about her. Nothing about the men she had killed. The silence felt like erasure, like the world had moved on while she was still stuck in that rain-slick rooftop, pulling the trigger. On the third day, called her into his office. His space was spare, a desk, a map wall, a coffee pot that smelled burned from overuse. He gestured for her to sit. "You're not eating," he said without preamble. "I'm not hungry," she muttered. He studied her for a long beat. "Miss Foster, you need to understand something. What you did out there, it wasn't normal. Not just the skill, the choice. Most people freeze, you didn't." Her jaw tightened. I didn't feel brave, I felt hollow, like I was watching myself do it. Leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "That's what frightens me, because hollow doesn't break, hollow keeps going." Her stomach twisted. "I don't want to keep going. I want to go home, to my life, my classes. I have an exam next week." "Do you?" asked quietly. "Or do you have blood on your hands that won't wash off in a campus bathroom sink?" The words hit her like a slap. She flinched, eyes burning. He sighed. "I'm not saying this to punish you. I'm saying it because you don't get to pretend anymore. Those men weren't random criminals. They were professionals, paramilitary. We're still pulling intel, but what we know so far isn't pretty." He slid a file across the desk. Photos, maps, documents marked with foreign insignia. Lillian forced herself to look. The faces staring back were the same ones that had glowed white in her scope, except now they had names, ranks, affiliations tied to a shadowy network moving weapons across borders. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why involve me at all?" "Because you were there," said simply, "and because you delivered when no one else could. That puts you in the middle whether you like it or not." Her chest tightened. She wanted to shove the file away, to scream that she was just a student, that none of this was her responsibility. But beneath the panic, something colder stirred, curiosity. "What happens if I walk away?" she asked. Studied her again. "You can, we won't stop you, but walking away won't erase what you've seen, or what you've done. And if this network realizes you were the one who pulled the trigger that night, they won't just let you go." Her throat went dry. That evening found her sitting alone on the steps outside the barracks. He moved with a limp now, his shoulder bandaged, but his presence carried the same steady weight. He lowered himself beside her without a word, staring at the twilight sky. "They're saying you might go back to school," he said after a long silence. "That's the plan," she murmured. He chuckled once without humor. "Plans, yeah. I had plans once too. Then life handed me a rifle and told me someone else would die if I didn't use it." She turned to him. "Does it ever stop, the faces, the feeling?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw worked, eyes fixed on the horizon. Finally he said, "No, but it changes. Some nights the faces remind me what I've lost. Other nights they remind me why I keep going." She hugged her knees, fighting the ache rising in her chest. "I don't want this life." His gaze softened. "Neither did we, but sometimes the fight chooses you." The words lingered long after he left. She sat until the stars came out, until the night air turned sharp, until she couldn't tell if her trembling was from cold or from the memories clawing at her. The next morning a security alarm jolted her awake. Red lights strobed down the hallway, boots thundered outside. She stumbled out of her room, heart in her throat, as armed guards rushed past. "What's happening?" she shouted. No one answered. Minutes later appeared, face like stone. "We've had a breach attempt on the perimeter. Small team probing our defenses, professional again. They didn't come for us." Her stomach dropped. "They came for me." Didn't deny it. By nightfall, she was relocated to a hardened deeper inside the facility. But safety felt like an illusion now. She sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the pistol they had left on the nightstand. Her reflection in the dark window looked older, harder, like she had aged years in days. She realized something that made her blood run cold. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a target. And whether she wanted it or not, her life had been rewritten in gunfire. What if the only way home was through the fire, not around it? Lillian sat at the small metal desk in the pistol still resting beside her like an unwanted companion. She had stared at it for hours, waiting for the moment when fear would ease, when her body would stop shaking, when her mind would release her back into the comfort of being just a student. But the release never came. The knock on the door startled her. She reached instinctively for the pistol before realizing it was, limping in with his usual steady presence. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "You're being moved again," he said. "Command thinks this place isn't secure enough." She folded her arms. "You mean they're still coming for me?" He didn't deny it. Instead, he dropped a sealed envelope on the desk. "That's the intel package. Wants you to see it." She hesitated, then tore it open. Photographs spilled across the desk, grainy surveillance shots of men she recognized from her scope, maps marked with red lines crossing borders, crates of weapons being loaded into trucks. A network sprawling far beyond one rainy night in Portland. Her stomach turned. "This isn't local." "No," said grimly. "It's bigger. Supply lines running across continents. Somebody wanted those SEALs dead because they got too close to the wrong shipment, and now you're part of the story." She pushed the photos away, anger flaring in her chest. "I didn't ask to be part of anything." "Neither did we," said quietly. The room went still. His words cut through the air like steel. He had said them before, but this time she heard the weight behind them, not as a soldier preaching, but as a man carrying the same burden she now felt pressing into her ribs. Finally, he leaned closer. "They'll keep hunting you. You know that, knows that. You could run, try to go back to your classes, your exams, your safe life. But the network won't forget. They'll find you eventually. Or," he paused, "you can help us finish this." She looked up sharply. "Help you?" "You've already proven you can do what even trained shooters struggle with," he said. "We've got one chance to hit their command node, cut the head off the snake. Wants you to come with us. He won't order it. He can't. But he'll ask." Her chest tightened. "You want me to kill again?" Shook his head. "I want you to make a choice about who you're going to be now." That night himself came. His presence filled the small, all iron and fatigue, his eyes carrying the storm she had seen before. "You've seen the intel," he said. "You know what's at stake. We've traced the cell to a warehouse outside Tacoma. Tomorrow night we move. If we succeed, we cripple their operation on the West Coast. If we fail, they scatter and you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." She gripped the edge of the desk until her knuckles whitened. "I'm not a soldier." "No," said softly. "You're something they won't expect. That gives you an edge." Silence stretched, thick with the weight of the decision pressing down on her. "Why me?" she whispered again, though the words felt hollow now. Leaned forward, voice quiet but sharp as glass. "Because you already answered the call once, and because sometimes the people who never wanted the fight are the only ones willing to finish it." That night she couldn't sleep. She lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, her mind a storm of images, her grandfather's weathered hand steadying her aim, the SEALs' voices over the radio, desperate but trusting, the faces in her scope falling one by one. She thought of the girl she used to be, late nights in the library, planning a future filled with healing. She thought of the woman she was becoming, hands bruised, eyes tired, blood on her conscience. And she realized something terrifying. Both were her. When dawn came, she stood in front of the mirror, hair tangled, eyes ringed dark. She didn't recognize the reflection, and yet she nodded to it. "I'll go," she said quietly to when he returned. The preparation moved fast. Gear issued, weapons checked, routes mapped. The SEALs moved like a machine, but she could feel their glances, not doubt exactly, but the weight of knowing they were bringing a civilian into their world. She felt the same weight herself. On the tarmac, as the helicopter blades began to turn, stepped up beside her. His voice carried low, almost drowned by the rising roar. "This isn't about proving anything," he said. "It's about choosing who you're going to be when it's over." She nodded, gripping the rifle they had given her, lighter than but still heavy with implication. As the Black Hawk lifted into the gray dawn sky, she felt the divide inside her widening. One part of her longed for textbooks and exams, for the quiet of a life untouched by blood. The other part, the part that had pulled the trigger without hesitation, leaned forward into the storm ahead. And she knew with a sinking certainty that whichever part won, she would never be the same again. What if the last battle wasn't about winning, but about deciding who you would be when the smoke cleared? The Black Hawk's rotors thudded through the night sky, carrying Lillian and the SEALs north toward Tacoma. The city lights glimmered faint in the distance, but ahead lay only darkness, industrial sprawl, empty warehouses, places that hid men who wanted them dead. Lillian sat against the cold fuselage, her rifle across her lap. Not the this time, but a lighter sniper system tuned for urban ranges, still lethal, still final. She ran her fingers along the grip, not for comfort but for grounding. Her body felt like a live wire, humming with tension. Across from her, studied her quietly. Finally, he leaned forward, speaking low so only she could hear. "This isn't just another mission for you. I know that, but don't overthink it. Keep your men alive. That's all you need to do." She nodded, though her throat tightened. Your men. She wasn't one of them, not really, but somehow they had become hers anyway. The insertion was fast, brutal. The helicopter dropped them onto the roof of an abandoned shipping facility, rotors barely slowing before it peeled off. Rain slicked the metal surface beneath their boots. The SEALs fanned out, moving with silent precision, weapons up, eyes sharp. Lillian followed, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She wasn't wearing body armor like theirs, not carrying as much gear. Just the rifle, a sidearm, and the gnawing certainty that tonight would decide everything. They breached from the rooftop stairwell, descending into the skeleton of the warehouse. The air smelled of rust, oil, and something acrid. Below, faint voices echoed. Flashlights cut through the dark, beams sweeping methodically. "Multiple tangos," whispered one of the SEALs. "At least a dozen guard positions. They're waiting." The team pressed forward, clearing room by room, suppressors snapping, bodies dropping silently. Lillian hung back, covering angles, her finger brushing the trigger but holding. Every step tightened the coil in her chest. Then they reached the heart of the warehouse, a cavernous space lit by harsh. Crates were stacked high, weapons packed in straw-lined boxes, maps pinned to walls with red markings stretching across continents. And in the center, around a steel table, half a dozen men barked orders into radios. Armed. Focused. The network's command node. His voice crackled faint over their comms. "That's your jackpot, take them down." The SEALs surged forward with violent precision. Erupted the air filled with smoke and shouts. Gunfire cracked, sharp and deadly. Lillian dropped to prone, scope snapping up, eyes locking on targets in the chaos. Her first shot tore through a guard rushing to flank the SEALs. The second clipped a man reaching for a rocket launcher. Each trigger squeeze burned through her chest, but she didn't falter. His voice rang out through the comms. "Overwatch East Catwalk." She pivoted, found two hostiles moving to higher ground, their rifles trained on the team below. She dropped one, then the other, heart pounding as their bodies crumpled into the steel railing. The fight was fierce but brief. When the smoke cleared, the warehouse was silent save for the groans of the wounded. The SEALs secured the command table, sweeping radios and documents into packs. "Mission accomplished," said breath ragged. But Lillian's scope lingered. Across the room, behind a stack of crates, one man remained. Not armed, not fighting, just watching. His eyes met hers through the dim light. Calm, measured. And she froze. This wasn't just another soldier. His bearing was different, deliberate, controlled. A commander, maybe the one who had ordered the ambush in Portland, maybe the one who had sent men to her doorstep. Her finger brushed the trigger. She could end it here. One shot, a clean finish. But he didn't raise a weapon. He just held her gaze steady, as if daring her to decide what kind of person she truly was. Her breath caught. Every kill until now had been survival, cover fire, protecting men who would have died without her. But this was different. This was execution. Overwatch status. His voice buzzed in her ear. She swallowed hard. The crosshairs stayed on the man's chest. She could almost hear her grandfather's voice. Violence should never be your first choice, little bear. But when evil stares down the barrel at innocence, someone needs to be ready to stare back. But was he evil? Or just another man who believed in his side the way she believed in hers? Her hands trembled. Slowly, she lifted her finger from the trigger. "Overwatch, all hostiles neutralized," she whispered. The man slipped back into the shadows, gone before anyone else saw. Minutes later, they exfiltrated into the night, helicopters whisking them away from Tacoma's sleeping sprawl. The mission was a success. The network was broken, its command scattered. But Lillian's heart stayed heavy. Back at the facility met them with clipped praise. "Outstanding work. We've dismantled their local operations. They'll be scrambling for months. You did well." The SEALs clapped shoulders, shared tired grins, their bond forged deeper in the fire. But Lillian stood apart, her eyes distant. Found her again, quiet voice cutting through the noise. "You let him go." She blinked. "You saw." He shook his head. "Didn't need to. I know that look. The one where you decide the war isn't worth losing yourself." She exhaled, shaky. "Did I make a mistake?" Held her gaze. "Maybe. Or maybe you reminded yourself you're still human, and that's harder than pulling the trigger." Later, alone in her quarters, Lillian sat with her hands in her lap, staring at the faint bruises still etched into her skin. She thought of the faces, the screams, the silence. She thought of the man she had spared, and she wondered if mercy was weakness or the last strength she still had. Outside, dawn crept across the horizon, painting the world in fragile light. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't justify or explain or beg forgiveness. Sometimes dignity simply acts, quietly, steadily, and it walks away without needing to be understood. And as Lillian Foster closed her eyes, she knew she would carry both lives inside her forever, the girl who wanted to heal, and the woman who had learned to kill. She didn't know which one the world would need next. But when the time came, she would not look away.